I didn't find the camera first. That's the thing I keep coming back to, even now. If I had, maybe I would have left immediately. Maybe I would have trusted my instincts. Maybe the first shock would have been enough. Instead, I found something smaller. Something that made no sense at all, but I convinced myself it didn't matter. For weeks. When you're married to someone for 6 years, you stop questioning the little things. You stop asking how they always know what coffee you'll want before you even decide. You stop noticing the way they always call right when you're having a bad day. You stop thinking about how they finish your sentences, just like that, as if they live inside your head. Eventually, you file it all under one category: love. At least, that's what I told myself. For 6 years. Mark remembered everything. Not in the cute husband way, but the I remembered our anniversary way. No, everything. The name of my 3rd grade art teacher. The restaurant where I cried after my first gallery rejection. The song I used to play when I couldn't sleep. Things I even forgot sometimes. And each memory he brought up felt like proof. Proof that someone finally saw me. That someone actually paid attention. I used to brag. My husband remembers my 3rd grade teacher's name. I would tell my friends. Sarah hated it. My best friend had been divorced twice. "Claire, that's not romantic," she said once. "What? There's remembering, and then there's whatever Mark does." At the time, I thought she was cynical. Sarah always was. Mark and I were happy, or at least I thought we were. It started on a Thursday. I remember because I was preparing for a gallery opening that weekend. I spent the whole afternoon in my studio. Around 4, Sarah called. We talked for 20 minutes. Mostly complaints, mostly meaningless. She argued that I shouldn't back out of the gallery invitation. In the end, I gave in. That night, Mark came home, kissed me, put his keys on the counter, and smiled. "You should do the gallery," he said casually. I froze. "What? The gallery, you should do it." I hadn't mentioned it to him, not that day, not that week. The only person I'd discussed it with was Sarah. She definitely hadn't spoken to him. He laughed, noticing my expression. "What?" he asked. "Nothing, it just feels like you always know what I'm thinking." His smile widened. 6 years, he said, and kissed my forehead. Simple, normal, forgettable. And honestly, I forgot about it too until 3 weeks later, when something else happened. Something impossible to explain. For the first time in 6 years, I started wondering if Sarah had been right all along. Mark didn't always notice. Not always. He could be late to events, forget a minor promise, or misread a mood. That's why it was so disorienting. He wasn't perfect. He was human, flawed, lovable in the way that keeps you off balance. Like the time he forgot my birthday last year. Not the gift itself. He remembered that eventually, but the morning. The card he'd planned to leave on the counter never appeared. I pretended it didn't bother me, but it did. Not because I needed a gift, but because I relied on him to notice me. And that reliance, it was something he always knew. Somehow, I remember the first time it made me pause. We were watching TV, nothing special, some comedy Sarah had recommended. He laughed at a joke I didn't get. Then casually he said, "Remember that night after your first gallery rejection?" I froze. "How did you?" I started. "I saw your note in the sketchbook," he said. "The one where you wrote that the restaurant made you cry. You never showed me, but I remembered anyway." I swallowed. It made sense, but the uncomfortable feeling didn't leave. It was as though every small moment I thought was mine alone had quietly been catalogued. Not for anyone else, just for him. I didn't want to feel violated. I wanted to feel loved. And I did, in a way, but something prickled in the back of my mind. Something I didn't dare fully acknowledge. Weeks passed. The gallery opened. The evening was perfect. Mark arrived early, remembered my preferences for wine and seating, and complimented my work in a way that felt intimate and authentic. I smiled, drank the wine, laughed at his jokes, and filed it under love. And yet, there was that tiny voice in the back of my head. Maybe Sarah had mentioned the gallery weeks ago. Maybe I had forgotten to tell him. That maybe shouldn't have mattered, but it did. I brushed it off each night before bed. Something about it bothered me, not enough to argue, not enough to ask another question. Just enough that I thought about it while brushing my teeth and decided it wasn't worth thinking about. I convinced myself I was imagining it. Then came the evening, I noticed the notebook. He'd left it on the kitchen table, a stack of papers peeking out. I didn't think it was anything unusual at first. Mark kept notes for work, personal projects, and little reminders. But the papers were labeled in his neat handwriting. Claire, overview. I froze. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it. Surely it was just a list of gifts or plans or something banal. I picked it up. Inside, the handwriting, it was warm, attentive, almost tender. He had notes about me. My routines, my moods, my subtle preferences, even things I'd never told anyone. The realization hit slowly. This wasn't just remembering. This was cataloging, observing, tracking. I wanted to close the notebook, throw it across the room, pretend I hadn't seen it. But I couldn't. Something about it pulled me in. The same way someone reads a diary they weren't meant to see. Every entry was love and care and obsession wrapped in the same sentence. Every small intervention he had done over the years suddenly made sense. The gallery suggestion, the tea when I was frustrated, the subtle redirection when I was upset. Everything. And yet, the uncomfortable feeling didn't leave. I realized something terrifying. I had trusted him. I had trusted love more than my intuition. I didn't leave, not yet. I wanted to understand first. I needed to see the full picture, because that's the thing about love after 6 years. You rationalize, you explain away. You remind yourself of every reason it was safe. You whisper to yourself that people aren't monsters. And then, sometimes, you ignore the unease entirely. That night, I went to bed pretending everything was fine. Pretending. But the seed of doubt was planted. And the way Mark had built his world, layer by layer, careful and subtle, was about to unfold before me in ways I wasn't ready to comprehend. The notebook sat heavy on the counter, just like that. Not a dramatic pile, not a secret hiding spot, just there. I couldn't bring myself to touch it, not yet. Mark walked past me, humming softly, completely unaware of what I'd noticed. I wanted to scream. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to cry. Instead, I made myself tea. I watched him from the kitchen doorway. He moved like a husband I knew, like a man who loved me, like a man who forgot birthdays occasionally, like a man who tripped over his own clumsiness trying to be charming. I reminded myself of that because the instinct to panic was growing stronger. And yet, the notebook lingered in my mind like a shadow. I thought about the gallery conversation. Weeks ago, maybe months. I had told Sarah about it. Did Mark know because I told him? Maybe. Could he have guessed? Unlikely. Maybe I just forgot. Every explanation I gave myself made sense. Each one pushed away the fear for a moment. But the uncomfortable feeling, it didn't leave. Over the next few days, I started noticing things more. Small, almost forgettable details. The way he remembered exactly how I liked my tea in the morning. The way he had arranged the living room cushions was just how I preferred them after I'd mentioned it once, 6 months ago. The subtle way he knew which side of the bed I'd sleep on without asking. Each time I noticed, my chest tightened. I tried to laugh it off. Mark noticed me noticing. He smiled. "You're thinking too hard," he said. "Relax, everything's fine." It should have reassured me. It didn't. That weekend, Sarah came over. She noticed something too. "You've changed," she said casually while sipping her coffee. "You look tense." "I'm fine," I lied. "You're not fine," she said. "Something's off with Mark." I laughed almost out loud. "Sarah, come on, he's not a villain." She didn't smile. "I'm not saying he is. I'm saying maybe you're ignoring things, little things that matter." I wanted to argue, to convince myself that it was paranoia. Instead, I listened. That night, I opened the notebook, not because I wanted to, because I had to. Inside, his handwriting was familiar, warm, almost tender. Entries with my name. Notes about my moods, the times I was frustrated, the things that made me laugh, the things that made me cry. And then the first real clue. Something that only I would know. Something that Sarah hadn't mentioned. Something that I had only told Mark, or had I? I stared at the page. My hands trembled. Mark walked in humming, carrying a basket of laundry. "You're still up?" he asked. I wanted to tell him to yell, to run. Instead, I closed the notebook slowly. "I just can't sleep," I said. He nodded, untouched. "I know that feeling. Simple, normal, lovable, human, and terrifying." Over the next week, I started cataloging everything in my mind, every moment, every gesture. I remembered the time he suggested I see a therapist. I hadn't known why at first. I'd thought it was supportive. But now, the memory shifted. He had suggested it not only when I was anxious, but also when I had been starting to suspect small things. Little details, patterns I hadn't yet recognized. It was subtle, almost invisible, and by the time I realized it, I had already begun explaining it away. Then came the moment I knew. I was painting in the studio late at night. Mark was in the living room reading. I felt a tug, a prickling sensation, something about the way the shadows fell, something about the quiet. I turned, something out of place. The strange thing is, I still wasn't trying to catch Mark. Looking back, I wish I had been. It would have been simpler. People imagine moments like this differently. They imagine a wife secretly investigating her husband, taking pictures. Connecting red strings on a wall, that wasn't me. I was still trying to prove I was wrong. Every day, every single day. Because if I were wrong, then I'd get to keep my marriage. If I were right, I wasn't sure what I'd lose. A few days after I found the notebook, I met Sarah for lunch. I hadn't told her about it, not yet. The notebook felt too personal, too strange, too difficult to explain. How do you tell someone your husband has pages of notes about your moods without sounding dramatic? Maybe it was innocent. Maybe it was weird but harmless. Maybe I was overreacting. Those maybes were still doing a lot of work for me. Sarah was halfway through her sandwich when she suddenly asked, "Can I ask you something?" I already knew I wasn't going to like it. "Sure." She hesitated. "When was the last time you made a decision Mark didn't know about beforehand?" I laughed. "What kind of question is that?" "A serious one." I rolled my eyes. "Lots of decisions." "Like what?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out, not because she was right, because I couldn't immediately think of an example, and somehow that bothered me. Sarah noticed. Of course she noticed. "See, that doesn't mean anything. I'm not saying it does." "Then what are you saying?" She sighed. "I'm saying that sometimes people get so good at taking care of us that we stop noticing how much space they are taking up." I hated the sentence immediately. Not because it was wrong, because it sounded possible, and I didn't want it to be possible. I wanted to be wrong. Wrong was easier. That night, I told myself Sarah was projecting again. Divorce had made her suspicious. That explanation made sense. The uncomfortable feeling didn't leave. The next week was normal, painfully normal. Mark forgot to pick up dry cleaning, burned dinner on Wednesday, spent 20 minutes looking for his keys before realizing they were in his jacket pocket. Normal husband things, human things. For a while, I almost felt embarrassed. Maybe I'd built a conspiracy out of nothing. Maybe the notebook was just a notebook. Maybe Sarah had gotten inside my head. Maybe I needed to let this go. Then Friday happened, and everything changed. I was cleaning the office, not snooping, actually cleaning. Mark hated organizing paperwork. I was putting old folders into storage boxes when I found a photograph. It had slipped behind a filing cabinet, an ordinary photo, nothing dramatic. Just Mark standing next to a woman. Both are smiling. Both are younger. I knew immediately who she was, Diana. I'd only seen one photo of her before, years ago. Back when Mark and I first started dating. The conversation had lasted maybe 2 minutes. His previous relationship. A difficult breakup. Nothing unusual, nothing memorable. At least not at the time. I almost put the photo away. Then I noticed something written on the back. A date and a sentence in Mark's handwriting. "Diana finally seems happy again." That was it, one sentence. Nothing sinister, nothing alarming, yet I couldn't stop staring at it because it sounded familiar. The wording, the tone, the observation, it reminded me of the notebook. For the first time, Diana stopped feeling like a former girlfriend. She started feeling like part of a pattern. And that realization made me deeply uncomfortable. That night I searched for her online. Not because I had a plan, because curiosity won. It took almost an hour. Eventually I found her, different city, different job, different life. No public relationship status, no dramatic social media posts, nothing useful, nothing suspicious. Just a woman living her life. I stared at her profile picture for a long time, trying to understand why my stomach felt strange. Then I noticed something. A comment, buried under an old photo, years old, easy to miss. Someone had written, "Still proud of you for leaving." That was all, no explanation, no context, no details. I felt cold. People don't usually congratulate someone for leaving a healthy relationship. Immediately, my brain started defending Mark. Maybe she moved for work. Maybe she left the city. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe. Every explanation sounded reasonable. None of them felt true. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about the notebook, the photo, the comment, Sarah's question. When was the last time you made a decision Mark didn't know about beforehand? Around 2 in the morning, I got out of bed, walked downstairs, and opened the notebook again. This time, I read further, much further. Most of it looked harmless. Observations, memories, preferences, small details. Then I found a section labeled things that help. I frowned. Underneath were bullet points. When Claire is frustrated with painting, bring tea, wait 20 minutes, Ask about the process. Not results, I stared. There were dozens of entries. When Claire feels overlooked, specific praise works better than general praise. When Claire becomes anxious, reassurance must be practical, not emotional. When Claire withdraws, do not push. Wait. She returns faster on her own. My heart started beating harder because every single thing on that page was true, not approximately true, exactly true. The tea, the questions, the timing, the reassurance, everything. I remembered dozens of moments I'd considered spontaneous, moments that had made me feel understood, seen, loved, and suddenly I wasn't sure what they were anymore. I sat there for almost an hour, reading, thinking, trying to figure out why it bothered me so much. The worst part wasn't the notes. The worst part was that they worked. Every strategy was effective. Every observation was accurate. Every intervention had helped me. So why did it feel wrong? I didn't have an answer. At some point, I heard footsteps upstairs. Mark is getting water, maybe going back to bed, maybe looking for me. Panic hit me. I closed the notebook immediately, put everything back exactly where I'd found it. Then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Tucked between two pages, almost hidden, a folded piece of paper, old, yellowing around the edges. I pulled it out carefully, unfolded it, and froze, because written across the top were 3 words. Learning Diana, overview. The room suddenly felt very small, not because I had found proof, not because I finally understood, because for the first time, I realized I wasn't the first person he'd studied. And somewhere, for the first time in 6 years, I stopped wondering if Sarah had seen something I missed, and started wondering how many other women had seen it before me. I didn't call Diana immediately. I wish I could tell you I was brave. I wasn't. For 3 days, I carried that folded page around in my head like a stone. Learning Diana, overview, 3 words, that was all. 3 words that somehow made everything feel different. Before that moment, I could still pretend the notebook was about me, a weird habit, an unhealthy coping mechanism, something personal, something isolated. But Diana changed that, because now there was a before. A version of this system existed years before I entered the picture. And once I knew that, I couldn't unknow it. The strange thing was that I still wasn't scared of Mark. Not exactly. That would have been easier. Fear is simple. Fear tells you what to do. Leave, run, protect yourself. What I felt was confusion, because every morning Mark still made coffee, still kissed me goodbye, still texted me stupid memes during lunch, still forgot things, still laughed too loudly at terrible jokes. He looked exactly like the man I'd loved for 6 years, and somehow that made everything worse. On the 4th day, Sarah finally lost patience. "You called her yet?" "No." "Why?" I stared at my coffee. "I don't know. That's not true." Unfortunately, she was right. I knew exactly why, because as long as Diana remained a stranger, she couldn't tell me anything I didn't want to hear. The moment I called her, that changed. The moment she answered, the story stopped belonging to me. Sarah sighed. "Claire, what? If you're this afraid of talking to her..." She paused. "You already know what she's going to say." I hated that sentence, mostly because I couldn't stop thinking about it afterward. That night, I sat in my car outside a grocery store for almost 20 minutes, just staring at her number. I had found it through an old business page. No profile photo, no social media links, just a number. 3 times I almost called. 3 times I hung up before it connected. The 4th time, she answered. "Hello." Her voice caught me off guard. I don't know what I expected. Maybe someone is angry, maybe bitter, maybe dramatic. Instead, she sounded tired, like a normal person. For a second, I almost hung up. "Hello? My throat suddenly felt dry. "My name is Claire." Silence, then a very long silence. And somehow that silence told me more than words could have, because she knew, immediately, not who I was, what I was, another woman. "Oh," just one word. Soft, quiet, heavy, I closed my eyes. "Can I ask you something?" Another silence, then, "Before you ask," she took a breath. "How long have you been married?" The question hit me like a punch. 6 years. A short laugh escaped her, not amusement, recognition. "Longer than me." My stomach dropped because suddenly she wasn't a stranger anymore. She was standing exactly where I was standing, just years earlier. I gripped the phone tighter. "Diana?" I hesitated. "I found something." She didn't sound surprised. "What did you find?" "A notebook." Silence, then, just the notebook. My heart started beating harder. Just the notebook. Not, "What notebook?" Not, "What are you talking about?" Just the notebook, like there were other things. Like she'd already had this conversation in her head 100 times. "What do you mean?" I asked. She ignored the question. Instead, she asked one of her own. "Tell me something." I waited. "What made you start looking?" The answer should have been easy. The notebook, the notes, the weird observations. But somehow that wasn't what came out. Instead, I heard myself say, "He always knows things." The silence on the other end became very still. Then Diana said something that made every hair on my arms stand up. "He told you the walls were thin." I froze. "What?" "He told you the walls were thin." My chest tightened. A memory flashed through my mind 3 years earlier. Sarah and I are talking in the kitchen. A private conversation, a private complaint. The next day, Mark somehow knew about it. When I asked how, he laughed. "The walls are thin." I hadn't thought about that moment in years. I never told Diana about it, never mentioned it, yet somehow she already knew. My voice barely worked. "How do you know that?" A long pause, then, "Because he told me the same thing." The world suddenly felt smaller, not because it proved surveillance, not because it proved anything, because it proved repetition, the same phrase, the same explanation, different woman, different house, different year, the same sentence. And that was somehow worse, because patterns are harder to explain away than events. I sat there without speaking. Finally, Diana asked quietly, "Did he make you feel crazy yet?" The question made me angry immediately. "No," too fast, too defensive. Diana noticed. "Okay," nothing else. No argument, no pressure, just okay, and somehow that felt worse than being challenged, because she sounded like someone remembering. Not someone guessing. Minutes passed. We talked, really talked about Mark, about the relationship, about the beginning, and every answer felt wrong, not because our stories were different, because they were so similar. The attention, the thoughtfulness, the way he remembered everything, the way he somehow always knew what was needed. Then Diana said something I still think about. You know what the hardest part was? I waited. When people asked why I left, she laughed quietly. I never had a good answer. My chest tightened. Why? Because none of the individual pieces sounded bad. That sentence landed harder than anything else, because she was right. A notebook didn't sound criminal. Remembering details didn't sound abusive. Making tea didn't sound controlling. Every piece looked harmless by itself. The problem only appeared when you stepped back far enough to see the entire picture. Then Diana became quiet. So tell me honestly. I swallowed. What? When was the last time you trusted your own memory more than his version of it? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out because I couldn't answer, and for the first time, that terrified me. Then Diana said something that would keep me awake for the next week. Something that completely changed the way I looked at the notebook. Claire, yeah, I didn't leave because of the notebook. My heart stopped. What? A long pause then. The notebook was just the first thing I found. By the time I hung up the phone with Diana, something inside me had shifted. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was clarity, a terrible, sharp clarity. I walked into the living room. Mark was there, reading a magazine, feet up on the coffee table. He looked at me and smiled. "Long day?" he asked. I didn't answer. He frowned. "You okay?" I shook my head slightly. "I need to show you something." I carried the notebook into the kitchen. Carefully, deliberately, I opened it to the page I'd memorized. I pointed to the bullets. The T, the questions, the reassurance, the timing. Mark tilted his head. "Those are the things that make you happy." "No," I shook my head. "Those were the moments I thought were spontaneous, the moments I thought were real." Mark's expression softened. "They were, I wanted them to be." "No," I said, my voice shaking. "You engineered them." He blinked, slowly, confused. "Engineered?" "Yes." The gallery suggestion, I continued. "The reassurance when I was frustrated, every single thing, it's all here, in this notebook. Planned, timed, delivered." He frowned, trying to understand. His eyes searched mine. "I was trying to protect the relationship," he said quietly. I could hear the conviction, the complete belief that he had done nothing wrong. "I know," I whispered. But it wasn't protection. It was control, and I didn't know it until now. He went quiet. I went through the entire notebook, showing him the entries about Sarah, the patterns, and the interventions. He didn't argue. He didn't get angry. He just listened, confused. I thought I was helping," he said finally. "Yes," I said. "You were, but you never asked me what I wanted. You just assumed. You never let me decide for myself." He nodded slowly, as if trying to understand. And that's when the final piece hit me. I opened the fifth hard drive, a folder labeled Next Steps Us. Inside, he had documented plans for our life, children, career moves, even how to handle my mother's influence. Every step accounted for, every hesitation noted, every emotional reaction is predicted. The gallery moment. The conversation that made me feel seen for the first time, planned for 8 months. Every feeling I thought was real was a tool. I looked at him. "I know now," I said softly. He frowned. "Know what?" "Nothing you did was spontaneous," I said. "Nothing I felt for you in those moments was real. You planned it all, even the things I thought were surprises, even the things I loved the most." Mark's face fell. He swallowed. I just wanted to make you happy," he said. "But you never asked me if that's what I wanted," I whispered. He stayed silent. I picked up my keys. "This ends now," I said. He didn't move, didn't protest, didn't threaten me. "I don't understand what I did wrong," he said quietly, sincerely. And in that moment, I realized he truly didn't, not maliciously, not even knowingly. He only knew what he thought was right. I left. I took my paintings, my supplies, the blankets I loved. The house, the fortress he had built, was no longer his anymore. It became just walls. And as I drove away, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom, not relief, not vengeance, not happiness. Freedom. I thought about every moment I believed he truly saw me, every surprise, every detail, every carefully timed intervention, and I realized I had been managed. Every moment of intimacy, every small gesture, every memory engineered. I had been loved the way someone loves a garden, carefully, attentively, proudly, but I had never been asked what the garden wanted. And in the silence of the car, I understood the truth: some love is real, some love is designed, and some love isn't yours at all. By the time the city lights blurred past the windshield, I was thinking only of one thing: which moments had been mine, and which had only been what he wanted me to feel. The answer would haunt me for a long time.